A new Stats Can report revealing that the gap between the rich and the poor has widened at the fastest pace.
The wealth gap between the rich and the poor is increasing. That is according to a new report from Statistics Canada this week. At the beginning of the year, the top 20% of earners in Canada held 2/3 of the country's net worth. Compare that with the bottom 40%, holding less than 3%.
I'm having a day. Or I'm having a life. I don't know, man. I just don't know what to do anymore. I'm sitting outside work, crying my eyes out in my vehicle. Because I can't function anymore. Financially, I don't understand anymore. I don't understand how I make $34 an hour and I can't function.
The lady here is just like many other Canadians. They're crying, suffering, and can't survive the backbreaking costs of living in Canada. But for some, they are living luxurious lives, and they are the elites of Canada who hold sway. The elites, or the top 1% in Canada, holds a whopping 25% of the nation's wealth. It's a worrying situation in Canada because it's becoming a battle between the haves and have-nots. It seems like affordable housing, good health care, decent living standards, and perks are only for a lucky few, while the rest are on the verge of hardship and chaos. The wealth gap in Canada is growing, with the wealthy living comfortably while the poor suffer. The middle class is disappearing, and they have no options, nowhere to turn, and no one to seek help from. In today's video, we'll explore the troubling reality of the wealth gap issue in Canada. A wealth gap, also known as income inequality or wealth inequality, refers to the unequal distribution of wealth or income among individuals or groups within a society or economy. It is a measure of the disparities in financial resources, assets, and income between different segments of the population. This gap can manifest in various forms, including differences in wages, assets, savings, investments, and access to economic opportunities. The wealth gap occurs for a variety of complex reasons, and it is influenced by multiple factors. One of the primary drivers of this gap is income disparities. When some individuals or groups earn substantially higher incomes than others, it allows them to have more money available for saving and investing, which over time leads to the accumulation of wealth. Moreover, the transfer of wealth, property, and assets from one generation to the next perpetuates wealth disparities, giving those who inherit significant assets a head start in building their wealth, while presenting greater challenges for those without such inheritances. Access to quality education also plays a crucial role in determining future income and wealth. Disparities in access to education and differences in educational outcomes can contribute significantly to the growing wealth gap. Plus, variations in employment opportunities, including access to well-paying jobs, job security, and opportunities for career advancement, exacerbate income inequality, further fueling the wealth gap. Sadly, the vast Canadian landscape is burdened by this dire issue, the curse of the wealth gap. Before we dive into its depth, let's look at the history of wealth inequality in Canada and emphasize it wasn't always this bad. In the past, Canada had a fairer and more prosperous society. During World War II, Canada escaped the devastation inflicted on many other European and Asian countries. Instead, it witnessed a period of industrialization and quick economic growth. The Great Depression's jobless found work in wartime factories, joined by women and migrants from farms. Canada emerged from the post-war era as one of the world's wealthiest nations, and its wealth has nearly quadrupled since then. However, in the era of Neo Liberalism, which took over after 1980, imbalanced growth became the norm. Income shot up for those who were already rich. For the top 1%, their average incomes doubled between 1982 and 2018, soaring from around $300,000 to $600,000. Neoliberalism heavily influenced government policies since the early 1980s, leading to low inflation and rising incomes for the wealthy. But high unemployment brought wage growth to a screeching halt throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Most Canadians only saw a bit of prosperity during the early 2000s oil boom, which came crashing down with falling oil prices in 2014. The decade decade from 2009 to 2019 could be aptly termed a period of zombie neoliberalism. Even though the Great Recession shattered faith in market-driven policies, no clear alternative emerged. Some policies veered aimlessly, while others continued down a confusing path. Then, in March 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic wreaked havoc on the world economy. It swiftly and severely altered the social landscape, bringing ongoing uncertainty. It exposed the flaws in Canada's public health system and the shortcomings of its social safety net. And now, in the bleak aftermath of the pandemic, we witness a harsher reality. As per Statistics Canada, the wealthiest 20% of households now command an overwhelming 67.8% of the nation's net worth in the first quarter, while the less fortunate groups scrape by with a paltry 2.7%. The Parliamentary Budget Office paints an even darker picture, estimating that the top 1% in Canada holds a stranglehold on 25% of the country's wealth. Recent academic assessments go further, pegging the distressing figure at a crushing 29%. In this disheartening scenario, the elites maintain an iron grip while the poor bear the weight of their oppression. The burden they bear becomes suffocating, particularly in a Canada burdened by its colonial legacy. The hard-working middle class in Canada toils tirelessly, but the true elites, the owners of wealth, lord over them like puppeteers. Their wealth empowers them while the poor remain enslaved. It's a crushing and profoundly sorrowful state of affairs. In this dark and back-breaking dystopia, the most significant cause of the decline in the overall wealth of all households, making up a staggering 92.1%, has been real estate. Here's what happened in simpler terms. The average value of homes owned by families dropped by a painful 8.6%. And if that wasn't bad enough, the national average price for a residential home shot up to a jaw-dropping $686,000, which is roughly 13.7% more than in the first quarter of 2022. That means that Canadians are paying much more for less valuable real estate. The Canadians with lower incomes saw their wealth take a hit because their mortgage debts increased more than the value of their homes. Their financial situation likely got worse due to growing non-mortgage debts, which went up by 4.6%. Younger Canadians, those 35 or younger, saw their wealth shrink by a painful 9% in connection to their homes, while Canadians between 55 and 64 faced a depressing 2% drop. As asset prices, especially in the real estate market in Canada, surge higher, those who possess these assets see their wealth skyrocket. Meanwhile, as the cost of living soars, it creates a colossal downfall for those who don't have any assets to their name. They find it almost impossible to build their wealth because an increasing portion of their income is devoured by everyday expenses, leaving them in a dire, unrelenting struggle to obtain the assets needed for wealth growth. Additionally, in any given economy, there is only so much money available to go around, and the wealthy continue to grow their wealth and accumulate more and more money. It leaves less for the poor and middle class. With less money left over, it becomes even more challenging for the lower and middle class to cover the increasing cost of living, further widening the wealth gap. Can the government truly grasp the grim fallout of this ever-widening wealth gap? While it might be just numbers to some, for everyday Canadians, it's a harsh path that leads to potential homelessness. When Canadians can't make ends meet, it's a picture of suffering beyond imagination. This grim reality is seen in the fact that between 25,000 and 35,000 people find themselves without a home on any given night in Canada, with Toronto having the highest number of homelessness individuals. It's a shocking twist for what was once known as the Great White North. But this tale doesn't end there. Poverty is on the rise thanks to this growing wealth gap. An alarming 1 in 5 adults in Canada live in poverty. It's a stark contrast to the promises of a better life and fairness that were once made. It seems those assurances were nothing but empty words, as the privileged thrive while the common people suffer, cry, and carry an overwhelming burden on their shoulders. If this isn't put to a stop, Canada may descend into turmoil and chaos. Discord from within the nation is brewing. In fact, violent crime in Canada is relentlessly increasing, with the murder rate reaching a 30-year peak. If the government, championing freedom and equality, doesn't abandon its unrealistic fantasies, Canada could suffer even more and risk becoming a third-world country, as the wealth gap keeps growing each day with no signs of stopping. It's high time to take action. Otherwise, a crisis much larger than the current one may shatter the dreams of prosperity for Canadians. To learn more about what happens as the wealth gap increases, check out this video here. And if this video brought value to you today, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video. Thanks for watching.